This body that was found, I don't think it's been 100% identified as her. Did you do anything to cause her to go missing?
No, not at all.
After a couple argued on a night out and went their separate ways, one of them ended up dead, and the other a suspect in a murder inquiry.
Brown County Public Safety, this is Therese.
Yes, how do I go about, missing persons?
Are you wanting to report a missing person?
Yes.
Okay, where are they missing from?
Last seen from corner of Howard and Maple Street, up the sardine can.
Okay.
Last night.
Okay.
And walking south on Maple Street through a friend.
Okay, and who's missing?
It's my girlfriend, and she does live with me, and she's never done this before.
What's her name?
Nicole Vander Heyden.
And does she live with you?
Yes.
And where was she last seen?
We're at the sardine can, and down, I think it's on the corner of Howard and South Maple, or Maple.
On Broadway there?
Yeah, just off of Broadway.
Okay.
And then she was walking south on Maple from there. I was en route in a different car to go down there.
Do you know what she was last seen wearing?
Yeah, she had a black and gray striped, horizontal stripe on top.
Okay.
And with black pants, black like capri pants, and gray high heel shoes.
Okay. Any jewelry or anything?
No.
And what's your name?
Doug.
Last name?
Detrie. D-E-T-R-I-E.
So she was on foot?
Yes.
No idea where she might go?
No idea. I called some friends.
Did she have a cell phone with her or anything?
Yeah, and it's been off since last night.
Okay.
So it goes right to voicemail.
Can you wait there for an officer? Do you
Yeah, how long would it be?
I'm not sure, but I think it's important that you report her missing.
Yes.
So just wait there, and we'll have an officer come over and talk to you. If it's going to be a long time, I'll call you back, okay?
That call was only made at 4 p.m. the next day. Despite having a 6-month-old baby, the Wisconsin couple, 31-year-old Nicole Vander Heyden and 35-year-old Douglas Detrie, were starting to question their relationship. It was May 2016, and the pair lived together with their blended family, Nicole's 2 children from a previous relationship, and their baby. Besides their constant bickering, they stayed together for the children's sake. The 35-year-old father told his mother he didn't know whether he was cut out to be a family man, and Nicole kept accusing him of wanting to be with other people. She was outgoing and good at hiding her problems, so when she and Douglas were invited for a night out on May 20th, she jumped at the chance. They arranged a babysitter so the couple could meet up with friends at a bar for a glam rock concert. But even when they had the chance to let their hair down, the pair continued to argue, and alcohol only fueled the fire. Eventually, they ended up hanging out with different friends. Nicole sent Douglas angry messages through the night, accusing him of being with other women. One read, "You hurt me all the time." However, his replies were calm, and gradually he stopped responding. As the night went on, Nicole messaged Douglas to say she was in a bar called the Sardine Can, but he didn't meet her there. He ended up going back home. After midnight, Nicole turned down offers of a lift back to the house and left the bar alone. She was never seen alive again. The next day, after the 911 call, officers and Nicole's loved ones were surprised by how long it had taken Douglas to alert the police. He said he'd assumed she had stayed with friends. When the caller came in to give a statement, it was noted that he'd taken a shower, leading investigators to believe that he may have something to hide, and the tension between the partners raised alarm bells. Douglas then became a person of interest. Tragically, days later, a female body was found in a field 3 miles from the couple's home. The victim had been murdered elsewhere, then thrown down an embankment. She was so badly beaten that she had to be identified from dental records and was naked, apart from a pink wristband from her night out and a sock. The rest of her clothes were found dumped off a local highway. It was Nicole. The autopsy report was gut-wrenching. The mother of 3 had suffered 241 injuries and had been strangled, possibly with an electrical cord found with blood on it. With bruises to her hands and broken fingernails, it was clear Nicole had fought hard before being overpowered. Evidence showed she'd had intercourse before being killed, but it was difficult to determine whether it had been consensual. Blood spatters on her body were consistent with being stamped on as she lay on the ground. It was a brutal, violent murder. When her blood was then found on the ground near her home, it was clear that she was killed in her own neighborhood. Douglas was devastated when Nicole was identified as the victim. Because of the altercation the night before and his long wait to call the police, he was arrested and held for 18 days while police investigated whether he was the perpetrator. But he was released soon after when DNA results came back from the lab with none of his DNA on Nicole's body, and his Fitbit showed that he was sleeping at the time of the murder. Finally, after 4 months, there was a huge breakthrough. The DNA on the electrical cord matched someone in the police system, 40-year-old George Birch. Officers could see from his mobile records that he'd searched for news on the investigation. Even more damning, the Google dashboard on his phone proved he'd been to the sardine can bar the night Nicole disappeared. He'd also been near her home and to the site where her body had been dumped. The 40-year-old was then arrested and questioned. George told a shocking version of events, but did it all add up? He admitted he had played a part in the killing that night, but blamed Douglas for the murder. George had only moved to the area months earlier and said he'd met Nicole at the bar that night. He had offered her a lift home around 3 a.m. They parked up near the house and had sex in his truck. George said that Douglas came out and discovered them and, enraged, he'd knocked the 40-year-old out. He claimed that when he came round, Douglas was standing over Nicole's beaten body. George said Douglas forced him at gunpoint to help him dispose of the body. That brought investigators back to the digital evidence, along with the Fitbit records saying that Douglas was sleeping. A driving monitor device on Nicole's car showed that it hadn't been driven, but it was supposedly used to dump the body. These wouldn't be the only questions to come up with George's statement. Why would Nicole hook up with someone right outside the home she shared with her husband? And if George had been forced to help a man get rid of a body, why did he calmly go fishing the next day? One crucial piece of information was brought before the jury when Douglas was questioned after Nicole's disappearance. Officers also noted that he didn't have defense wounds, despite the fact that the victim had fought for her life. The prosecution believed George had lured Nicole into his truck with the promise of a lift home, and when they'd got there, he'd forced himself on her, beaten her to death, and then dumped her body. The electrical cord had George's DNA on it, so did her body. Finally, 40-year-old George Birch was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. It was revealed George had faced a murder charge back in 1998. A jury had found him not guilty of a gang-related shooting, and at the time of the murder, he was wanted for hit-and-run charges. 2 months later, he was sentenced to life without parole. Nicole's loved ones applauded. George didn't make a statement. The judge called it the most brutal murder committed by one person in the history of Brown County. Additionally, the judge ordered that George would never profit from any book or film about the case. If any were to happen, the proceeds would go to the victim's family. To date, George Birch continues to claim he was simply caught up in another couple's argument. For more True 911 calls, watch this episode next.